You would not believe the number of ways that the anti-gun crowd tries to restrict your right to keep and bear arms. One way you may have heard about is their attempts to ban so-called high-capacity magazines. Joe Biden talks about this ban quite a bit, but high-capacity magazines is just one of the many propaganda terms that anti-gunners like to use. The phrase you see actually describes ordinary equipment, ordinary accessories that come standard with a lot of firearms, both long guns and handguns. But the anti-gunners' word games are not the only problem. The bigger issue is this: banning standard capacity magazines will not deter determined killers. That includes the murderers responsible for horrific mass shootings. So who will the ban hurt? The answer is law-abiding citizens seeking to exercise their Second Amendment rights. Let's get into the details in just a moment. Hey folks, I'm Mark, and welcome to the Four Boxes Diner. Anti-gunners like to pass laws that let them say, hey, we did something. The only problem is that their something doesn't stop the bad guys from doing bad things with firearms. You see a perfect illustration of this problem in laws seeking to limit the capacity of gun magazines. 9 states in the District of Columbia have imposed such restrictions. Magazines are generally limited in these laws to 10 rounds of ammunition, but a couple of states have actually set the maximum capacity at 15 rounds. But do these restrictions actually limit crime or stop crime in some way? No, they do not. We know this because from 1994 to 2004, the federal assault weapons ban limited magazines that held more than 10 rounds. During that 10-year period, the gun-related murder rate was 19.3% higher than after the ban expired. Now, some of you might be asking, hey, Mark, doesn't limiting magazine capacity stop mass shootings or something? No, magazine bans do not help there either. You're probably familiar with the March for Our Lives movement, which emerged after the 2018 Parkland shootings in Florida. One of the main goals is to ban high-capacity magazines. That's a big talking point they have. But here's the thing. The Parkland shooter, Nicholas Cruz, did not use high-capacity magazines when he shot up the Parkland school. He used 10-round magazines in the rifle. And Parkland is just one example of this. Look at the high school shooting in Santa Fe, Texas in May of 2018. The killer there used 2 guns, neither of which used so-called high-capacity magazines. One was a shotgun, the other was a revolver, which holds no more, by the way, than 6 rounds of ammunition. Or what about the 2007 Virginia Tech shootings? The perpetrator there did not even use a rifle. He used 2 semi-automatic pistols, a .22 caliber and a 9mm. He had as many as 19 magazines holding 10 to 15 rounds each. He just brought a lot of magazines. Need a more recent example than this? Well, consider the school shooting in Oxford, Michigan. There, the shooter used a semi-automatic handgun to kill 6 people and wound 40. When he was arrested, he had 2 15-round magazines with him. Limiting magazine size to 10 rounds would have had little to no impact on the lethality of these attacks. Again, these examples all demonstrate a fundamental point, that a madman, a psychopath, a murderer determined to commit mass murder will find a way to kill. That's the unfortunate reality of the human condition. And never mind about the magazine capacity, a killer doesn't need a gun at all. Think about what happened in 2016 in Nice, France, when a terrorist drove a cargo truck into a crowd, killing 86 people. And then there was the 2018 attack in Toronto, Canada, when a killer drove a van into a crowd, killing 10. The anti-gunners like to argue that a limit on magazine size means that the bad guy will have to stop shooting and reload, and this gives good guys an opportunity to tackle, shoot, or disarm the shooter. Yes, I suppose standard-sized magazines may provide some sort of a tactical advantage to the shooter, but they also provide a tactical advantage to law-abiding citizens. In the Supreme Court's 2008 decision in Heller, this is very, very important. You see, the Supreme Court instructed us that to understand the Second Amendment and apply it, we should not focus on the potential ways in which a law or a weapon might be misused. And why is that? Well, it's quite simple. Criminals will always procure for themselves a tactical advantage, and that's because they're criminals. So let's talk about this more pragmatically. If you're subject to a ban on standard capacity cartridges. You'll have 10 or fewer rounds of ammunition. But the criminal who breaks into your home or decides to start shooting up a school, what have you, will not face the same limitation. That's what criminals do by definition. They break the law. So the restriction on high capacity magazines is not going to affect them at all. And now you're actually in greater danger because they're outgunning the law-abiding citizen. And I assure you, if you're facing a criminal who has a gun with a 17-round magazine, then you're going to want at least 17 rounds as well. You're safer in your home when you can defend yourself properly. And even if you're facing one violent criminal, a single shot or even several rounds might not be enough to protect yourself. You might miss with several rounds, or he may not go down. Because why? The killer, the guy in your home, is breaking, trying to hurt you. He may be high on drugs like PCP or meth or something else, and he can be shot several times without even knowing he's been shot, never mind going down. Plus, of course, we know that criminals often work in groups, more than one. Columbine had 2 shooters, for example, so did San Bernardino. We know that at least 7 attackers were responsible for the Bataclan theater massacre in Paris, France. And the list goes on and on. Simply put, you need standard capacity magazines because criminals will come prepared. Okay? More ammunition is always better. Once you're out of ammo, you're out of the fight and possibly dead. There's a reason why police carry extra loaded magazines in their duty belt and or in their cruisers, and it's because their lives depend on it. But states like New York, New Jersey, Vermont, and California have decided that police can carry standard capacity magazines, while ordinary Americans who have Second Amendment rights are somehow denied the ability to protect themselves in the same way from the same criminal predators that are dealing with the police in those particular states. Speaking of Vermont, by the way, I want to mention this thing in particular. The laws in that state limit magazine size to 15 rounds for handguns, but 10 rounds for long guns. Now, does this make any sense at all? If the real reason for these bans of magazines capacity carrying over 10 rounds is to limit the loss of innocent life? Of course, that doesn't make any sense. These are arbitrary and capricious, decisions that are made by these politicians. Of course, the real motivation is not actually to stop criminals, in my view. It's simply to harass law-abiding citizens. Because if the states wanted to reduce violent crime, then they would let law-abiding good guys keep and bear arms without these unreasonable, silly restrictions on so-called magazine capacity sizes and whatnot. Okay? Because no regulation at the end of the day should prevent you or deter you from being prepared to defend yourself, your family, and your community with a firearm or otherwise. So we know that limiting magazine capacities to 10 rounds would not have stopped the Parkland shooting, Santa Fe, Virginia Tech, or some of these other mass shootings that we're all familiar with. But still, Joe Biden and other anti-gunners are pushing for this high-capacity magazine ban. And what's going on here? Let's really dig into this for a moment. Well, think about the potential for a slippery slope, okay? If the anti-gun lobby can secure a federal ban down to 10 rounds, let's say, well, what's to stop them from going even stricter and having even stricter limits down the road? Sure, a 10-round limit is standard today. That's what they would ban now. But why couldn't they down the road say, we're going to now reduce it to 7 rounds next year, and maybe 2 rounds the year after that, and maybe 1 round after that? The anti-gunners will never stop clamoring for restrictions on your gun rights. You can never satisfy or sate them, and you shouldn't even try, of course. That's partly because their supposed solutions do not actually solve the problem they're focused on. And it's partly because they take an incremental approach, meaning a step-by-step approach, to their ultimate goal, which is the total ban on firearms in the United States and gun confiscation. That's where they would go if they could get there. And it's our job as those who support the Second Amendment and the rest of the Bill of Rights to make sure that does not happen. So let's wrap up. A ban on so-called high-capacity magazines does not make sense. There are at least 3 reasons why we've talked about in this video. First, we had a federal ban on these magazines for 10 years, and the murder rate actually dropped significantly only after the ban expired. Plus, this kind of ban does not deter mass murderers who don't follow laws as a general matter anyway. That's why they're murderers and criminals. Second, like any gun ban, a ban on standard capacity magazines will not slow criminals down, but they would simply in turn hurt law-abiding citizens that need to confront the criminals on our streets or in our homes. We should be preparing the good guys to counter these criminals and not hindering the good guys at and helping out the criminals. And that's what self-defense is all about, right? Protecting the law-abiding and the innocent who may have to confront evil on our streets or elsewhere. And third, And last but not least, passing this kind of like limitations on so-called high-capacity magazines creates a slippery slope precedent for all of our gun rights. You see, right now they may say, look, the maximum capacity for your magazine today should be 10 rounds, okay? But when that doesn't limit violent crime, which it won't, right? Because criminals are not going to stop being criminals. Then what will happen next is that the anti-gunners will call for even tighter restrictions. And they'll go from 10-round magazine limits to 7, to 5, to 2, to 1, and to none. That is the ultimate goal, of course, of the anti-gunners, to get rid of guns in private hands in the United States. And that's what the Second Amendment is there to help thwart. Okay, I hope you learned something today. Thanks again for joining me here at the Four Boxes Diner, where we serve fresh, hot Second Amendment news and analysis. And if you like what you heard, please subscribe and help spread the word. And again, we'll see you next time at the Four Boxes Diner.
Orders up. Table 2A.